Is it just me, or did anyone notice that it seems like whenever a PBC fight is rumored, in this case, Keith Thurman versus Sean Porter, they always seem to happen? So sometime this year, I'm hearing from a very close person, a person very close to the situation, is that Keith Thurman versus Sean Porter is on the horizon. Now, of course, they've been already doing their pre-fight build-up, with various different interviews on YouTube talking about how they would like to fight each other. They've even done a face-off earlier. Remember how Leo Santa Cruz and Abner Maris did something similar before they fought. So let's talk about Keith Thurman a little bit. Keith Thurman has a very good resume outside of what people may think. Yes, people didn't want him to fight Luis Collazo after coming off of such a big win over a very well-known and respected fighter in Robert Guerrero. Luis Collazo, Robert Guerrero, Leonard Bundu, Julio Diaz, and I'm not going in order, Soto Carras, Diego Chavez, Jan Zavek. And you may think, well, those have been all B-class to C-class talent to a certain extent. But if you look at the way he's beat these guys, and if you look at the resume of these guys before they fought Keith Thurman has been in a situation where he's been beating good talent. It's just that this talent has been somewhat unknown to the mainstream hardcore fans. If you don't know, I'm T-Street Controversy. This is T-Street Controversy Live of RealCombatMedia.com, and I cover every single major fight live. Will it be on Premier Boxing Champions or will it be on Showtime? A fight like this, I'm thinking it may be on Showtime. I would have loved to see Keith Thurman versus Amir Khan, but for some reason, I don't think it's Keith Thurman. I actually think it's not in Amir Khan's plans to fight a fighter like Keith Thurman at this point in time in his career. Because if you don't know, Amir Khan is the type of fighter where he can't take a loss at this point in time in his career. He just can't. Because then he's going to be, what level is he going to be at? So he has to pick his fights very carefully and try his best to get the biggest fight possible. So another thing is, since Floyd Mayweather is supposedly officially retired, we can look for Keith Thurman to be upgraded once again to the WBA Super World status. Remember, the WBA has two belts. It's the WBA Super World and it's the regular WBA or World belt. Keith Thurman has the WBA World belt, but what Keith Thurman said in a recent interview is that, well, not a recent interview, an interview that I did with him a little over a month ago, is that Floyd Mayweather had no mandatory, so therefore Keith Thurman couldn't go to the WBA. So here, you know what? It's a little long. It's 3 minutes or so long, but let's look at it as source material. And plus, everyone likes to hear Keith Thurman talk anyway. So I'm gonna play it for you in the background, and please subscribe. I cover every single major fight live. We got a lot going on. They're going through some family issues, but we're getting to the point now where we're moving on. We're moving on. So look at it like this. Well, let's let you hear Keith Thurman first.
The WBA World Champion. A question a lot of fans have been asking is why
my voice has gotten better
to the WBA as far as Floyd is the WBA Super World. Why have you?
Because I already talked about it earlier. A super champion is not obligated to fight any mandatories. He has 0 mandatories. I can not even if I wanted to go to the WBA, there is no power. He is above the power with that super title.
Okay.
That super title puts him on a special cloud above everybody else where he's floating around getting fed, grapes and strawberries and all the goodies. You know what I'm saying? He's in his little private chamber and nobody can touch him.
So, if you don't know, a little over 6 months ago, not about 6 months ago, the WBA had ordered WBA World Champion at that point in time, Carl Froch, to fight WBA Super World Champion Andre Ward. So you got, for example, Gennady Golovkin, who's the WBA Super World Champion, and then you got Danny Jacobs, who's the WBA World Champion, but they haven't been ordered to fight each other. You have Floyd Mayweather, who's the WBA Super World Champion, which he won from Canelo Alvarez. And then you got Erislandy Lara, who's the WBA World Champion. So basically what I'm getting from what Keith Thurman has said is that he cannot go to the WBA and say, listen, I want to fight my mandatory. But basically, unless the WBA says themselves, well, I want this mandatory to fight this I want this world champion to fight this super world champion, then there's no mandatory status. So, just to stop it right there, we can expect that, Keith Thurman could likely be elevated to being the super world champion. And remember, he was only the interim. Andre Berto right now has the WBA interim champion. He was the WBA interim champion. I forgot who he won it from. Keith Thurman was the WBA interim champion, and then he was upgraded to the WBA world champion. And I understand the WBA situation is difficult to understand. Andre Berto, who's the WBA interim, has fought Floyd Mayweather, but Keith Thurman was once a WBA interim champion himself. So not to confuse you too much, we can expect now that Floyd Mayweather has been, supposed to be retiring sometime in the next month, maybe 2, 3, for Keith Thurman to be elevated to the WBA Super World Champion and likely fight a Sean Porter for that. Now, can Sean Porter beat a Keith Thurman? See, I don't think so. If I was to have to pick one person, I'm going to be picking Keith Thurman because of boxing ability, even though we saw the little bit of weakness against Luis Collazo when it came to the body shots. One thing about Keith Thurman and Sean Porter is Keith Thurman is going to be fighting a fighter that has never come. Keith Thurman hasn't fought a fighter like Sean Porter, who's young in their prime and is going to be coming right for him. So if Keith Thurman was to take a loss, then Keith Thurman is actually, going to be considered to be a little bit all talk as far as fans are concerned, even though it'll be a loss against a good opponent. It's just that with all the talk and the knowledge that he possesses, which he does, you would think that he would be able to neutralize as somewhat. I don't want to say Sean Porter is a one-dimensional fighter, but someone who doesn't have pure boxing skill, if that makes sense. Sean Porter can fight, but as far as pure boxing skill, I don't know, if he, I haven't seen it from him. So if you look at Sean Porter's record, his resume is actually pretty outstanding as well. When you look at Paulie Malignaggi, Devin Alexander, Julio Diaz, Kell Brook, even though he lost to Kell Brook, I said Paul and Adrian Broner. His resume, in my opinion, is better than Keith Thurman's, as far as, the level of high quality names. So yes, he did lose to Kell Brook. Kell Brook did beat him at his own game, but I just don't see the style of a Sean Porter being able to beat a clean, clear thinking boxer in Keith Thurman, especially since he had that scare against Luis Collazo. I expect him to tighten up a little bit on the body. So I'm T Street Controversy. This is T Street Controversy Live with RealCombatMedia.com, and I cover every single major fight live.